Welcome to the JEMS Report, brought to you by Clarion Events, Fire and Rescue Division, and the Journal of Emergency Medical Services. My name is Ted Lee, and I'm the Editor-in-Chief, along with Jeff Frankel, our Managing Editor. We'll be bringing you industry leaders and subject matter experts for all things pre-hospital medicine that affect EMS today. And today we have a very special guest, Miss Melissa Taylor, RN with the Department of Health of Tennessee in the Division of Emergency Preparedness. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Yes, I am a registered nurse. I'm a nurse consultant for the Tennessee Department of Health and Emergency Preparedness. I also have a background of critical care and emergency care nursing, and this is my 40th year as a first responder. So I spent many years as a paramedic on EMS and still do some first response with EMS and fire. My husband is a fire chief, and so I work a little bit with his department doing some training, especially in the mental health realm, and doing some medical assist on calls.
Well, great. Well, thank you for your service and your long years in EMS. And today, we're talking about, you mentioned briefly, mental health. Just a little preview for our audience. You're going to be writing a series of articles for us based around mental health and the importance of mental health.
That's correct. I wanted to do something that highlighted some of the things that we're doing here in Tennessee to better mental health resources and response for our first responders. And when I talk about responders, I talk about that as first responders and first receivers, hospital staff, ER staff, fire, EMS, law enforcement. All of those can be on the front lines. As we saw during the pandemic, our public health staff were on the front line as far as being responders and testing and giving out vaccinations. And I saw the toll that it took on everyone's mental health. Now, as far as being a first responder for 40 years, when I first started, there was nothing that we had no resources for any type of mental health support to help responders with the traumatic events that we saw sometimes on a daily basis as working through our shifts and assisting the communities. And for years and years, the attitude was, this is what you signed up for. You need to suck it up. You need to move on, suppress it, go on to the next call. And it has really come to light how dangerous that mentality is when you're talking about people who are being exposed to traumatic events frequently and are just human, that have normal reactions to abnormal events. And then we don't give them an outlet to be able to deal with that or have coping strategies. We have always heard forever about PTSD, especially with our military. Study finds that there is more PTSD in first responders than in the military. But I can also couple that with saying that a lot of people in our military who come home seek jobs in the first responder field. Because that's the helper mentality. That's what we do. We have been behind the 8 ball and have been treating mental health issues reactively instead of proactively. And I think the pandemic has brought a lot of that to the forefront, and we have taken advantage of that to try to be preemptive and proactive in offering mental health resources and education to our responders across the state.
Yeah, I'm gray, and I've been in for a while as well, and I did that transition from military into paramedicine, just like a lot of our providers do. I think we've known for a really long time that mental health was a concern. But why do you think that it's getting so much focus now? And granted, it needed the focus before. And to your point, it was always, well, this is what you signed up for, suck it up, buttercup, just, keep charging. And that's the case. But, we knew that there were issues there, or there were problems, and we saw burnout or rust out or whatever you wanted to call it, and a lot of it associated with just the toll mentally, not just physically, about the job. So other than of course there's the obvious, COVID. We use COVID as a benchmark for everything, but what do you think post-COVID mental health became such a battle cry or a rallying for the first responders?
I think we really saw in mass the effects that that type of stress and that type of response took on our first responders and our healthcare profession as a whole. Mass retirements, people leaving the field to seek other jobs. Suicide rates have increased. And while we've known the statistics for a long time, I think now when you have such a sharp increase and it's being seen by the public and it's being seen by the individuals who are working the incidents, um, people are starting to say enough is enough. Why are we losing so many lives over this? Why are people losing careers? And what can we do to stop that? Um, Finally, some bells have gone off, and people are realizing the connection between mental health and physical health. And that if you don't have good mental health, it's going to affect your physical health. Just like if you don't have good physical health, it affects your mental health.
Right.
So we need to start treating the person as a whole and stop putting mental health out here in a box that we contain and as something different, something we don't talk about. Um, it's a part of the whole system, and we have to be healthy all the way around. So, in recognizing that, we've made some great strides in Tennessee in just eliminating the stigma around mental health with our first responders, providing educational support, providing resources such as our disaster mental health strike team, and promoting the use of critical incident stress management. And it has, over the past 3 years, grown exponentially. The use of our response team, the number of entities that are requesting the trainings that we do. We highlight mental health first aid, which is through the National Council for Behavioral Health. It's an evidence-based training that we've adopted in Tennessee. The Tennessee Department of Health partnered with the National Council to bring instructor classes across the state. We decided to train all of our public health staff in mental health first aid, plus offer instructor trainings to all our community partners, focusing on our first responders. So many of our first responder agencies have now implemented the training into their agency, their new employee orientation, to make sure that everyone has that training. And then they're starting to use triggers as far as if a certain type of call is run, a fatality, a child fatality, that kind of triggers, we're going to have a debriefing. We're going to call out the strike team, and we're going to offer a debriefing for our people, because we found that basically just talking about the incident and being able to talk through it, work through it, is a tremendous asset to being able to cope with the trauma and to build those peer relationships and those support systems that are needed to be able to, do your job day to day.
So you mentioned that 3 years, this has been ramping up more and more. Is that Tennessee's response to, okay, we noticed this during COVID, and then trying to sort of build the infrastructure for this, and then once it's in place, it becomes common and then used more?
So actually, the focus was before COVID that this
Okay.
conversation started. The region that I work in, the Northeast region, we brought mental health first aid to our region in 2018, trained all of our staff and community partners. Um, and it was recognized as through the state Department of Health as what's called a bright spot. It earned a bright spot award, which meant that it was a program that was deemed replicable across the state. In 2019, the Tennessee Department of Health contracted with the Tennessee Federation of Fire Chaplains, who at the time was the lead agency for critical incident stress management response for first responders. And they had CISM teams that would respond when called upon. But we decided that we wanted to build a team that was more comprehensive. So we partnered with them because why reinvent the wheel? They were the
Right.
lead in what it was doing. They're ICISF sanctioned. And what we did was a little bit of reinvention of the team, and we added folks to the team with varied backgrounds. Other than first responders, we still have law enforcement, EMS, fire backgrounds, but now we also have teaching backgrounds, we have mental health backgrounds, we have multiple different community partner type backgrounds so that we can respond to any group in Tennessee that has experienced the traumatic event and would like to have a debriefing or a response from our team. And we found too that especially first responders, they respond better to team members who have a similar background. So if we get a call from EMS for a debriefing, we're going to send team members with EMS backgrounds. The same with law enforcement, with fire. If we respond to a school, we will send team members with education backgrounds, with backgrounds of working with children. So we've had great success with this team since 2019 when we developed the team. We hold 2 training academies a year for new team members. It's a week-long academy. They're trained in multiple modalities of critical incident stress management, mental health first aid, youth mental health first aid, psychological triage, and suicide intervention. And that's our main focus for that week-long academy. We then have quarterly trainings for our team, and we bring in specialized trainings throughout the year to where team members can advance in other areas that they may be interested in, such as CISM for schools or CISM for um, any type of traumatic event. So by doing that, we're continuing the education of our team and the ability of what we can respond to. We've had 11 major deployments to areas of disaster, such as tornado response, flooding response within our state, multi-day responses to where we not only respond to the community at large, and our team is working within the community, we're also there supporting the responders that are working the event. And we've had a total of 394 call outs for assistance since the beginning of our team. Well, it's 2019 through 2023. So it's quickly become the most utilized asset of our Department of Health. So those are a couple things that we have been focusing on. And then through the pandemic, we were really fortunate to have this team in place because we did multiple briefings for our local health departments across the state to help our employees deal with the stress of working the pandemic. So, I think we are developing some really good best practices in the mental health realm as far as being able to respond to our responders.
That's great. Now, you said this kind of started in the Northeast region, and it's been replicated throughout the state now, so it's statewide.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And are your teams a spread out through the state, or are they centrally located? Do you have multiple teams?
So we have
what's
one
the operational
overarching
aspect?
team, and we have over 200 members on the team at this point in time. We have a paging system. We have an 800 number that's monitored through our UT Lifestar dispatch for the team. So if a group wants to activate our team for any type of response, they can call an 800 number, and then they're passed to our team dispatch. And then we have an app that we can text all of our team members, and we put the request out there, and then those that can respond will sign up for the response.
So what's your typical response? 24, 48, 72 hours? Do you have a
Yesterday,
general?
I did a response in 6 hours.
Okay.
We got a call for an urgent debriefing, and it was around 1 p.m. and I had a team there, and we did a debriefing at 7 p.m. that night. So we can have very quick turnarounds. We've had calls for diffusings, for response on scene to help, and in those instances, we've had members on the ground within an hour. So we have, we have team members strategically placed across the state,
Yeah.
so we can usually mount a very quick response.
So outside of your state, are you guys working with other states or other groups to try to replicate or share success,
We
best
have had
practices like you
requests.
mentioned?
Yes, we have had requests from other states for information on how they can replicate some of the things that we're doing. We have presented at some conferences across the country, highlighting some of the practices that we're doing, and we have had several requests from states for information on how they can start doing similar or the same things that we're doing.
That's amazing. That's great. Because, of course, this isn't, isolated to Tennessee. It's not isolated to just EMS or just fire. This is a whole community and a whole group that can benefit from this. So thanks for, giving the information about Tennessee. And it's very interesting. And I commend you for all the hard work that you guys have been putting into this. I'd like to turn just a little bit for the last couple of minutes that we have about the articles that you're going to be writing. So, what do you have in mind? What's your focus, and kind of why is this, the passion that you said, hey, this is what I'd like to write about?
So I'm going to write a set of 6 articles surrounding responder mental health and just kind of break it down. The first article talks about stigma and how do we crush that stigma? How do we turn the tide and change those attitudes? How have we done that? What are some best practices? And then I'm going to talk about where responders have typically gone in the past for help with traumatic incidents. And many of them use negative coping strategies that
Right.
we need to break that cycle. And many of those negative coping strategies are what leads to loss of job, loss of family, loss of life in some cases. So I want to kind of talk about that. And then I want to talk about, where should responders go for assistance? What types of things and resources could be in place, need to be in place? And, you know, some of this stuff is really simple. There are a lot of resources out there, but having the support to actually use those resources is what's needed in many cases. There's some great resources out there, but for fear of job loss or from fear of being thought of as less of a person or not as good of a responder, um, many people won't utilize those resources. And when in fact, they're hurting themselves and they're hurting their career by not utilizing those resources.
Right.
So that's a big part of what I want to talk about, and talk about again the resources and best practices that we've started in Tennessee, and then just looking at everything as a whole and how can we affect change that will be lasting and have positive impacts.
Right. Well, that's great. And yes, to your point, for so long, everybody that goes through these things, you think you're alone, and you think that you don't have any resources available, or you're afraid to use them. But breaking the stigma, and we're getting much more in tune with, okay, yes, this is important. This is not any different than a regular physician checkup or a
Right.
dental appointment or an eye appointment, and that if we stay on top of these things before they become problems, we have a much better way of dealing with them and kind of regulating them. So hats off to you for a great job, and for focusing on the mental health of first responders. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day with us, and we're looking forward to your articles on GEMS, and we hope to be working with you more in the future as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it.